Yeah, no pressure, Brett. Thanks a lot. Okay. Well, I think Brett has beautifully put the importance of our experts by experience and how we need to engage with them. And also to highlighting the social context that we don't live in isolation and all these pressures are going on in everybody's lives and we need to be cognizant of it. I'm delighted to be presenting. We're very proud of this study. It's the first ever prevalent study of the mental health of children and young people. And Mary Donaghy slipped in the parents as well. So it's a fabulous study. It's a landmark study for Northern Ireland, and it's something that we would love to replicate in the adult population. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. We had a fantastic team. Nobody got very much money for delivering this project because it was expensive to go out, and we had to contact 30,000 households to try and find children. So we had a fantastic team from Queen's, the Mental Health Foundation and Ulster, and we have two new additions who are in the dark. Karen Hall and Emma Nolan joined the team once data had been collected, and they've been fantastic. So in terms of my presentation, I'll just quick summary of the study aims, the methodology, key findings, conclusions and next steps, and then I'll follow on to Anne, who'll be looking at the parent data. So in terms of our background, our aims, we wanted to collect robust data on the prevalence of mental health problems in 2 to 19-year-olds. We wanted to look at identifying some of the risk and protective factors in our population. And we also wanted to explore some of the links between child and youth wellbeing and parental mental health, and also consider some of the lifestyle and environmental factors. And we also explored adverse child experiences in the 11 to 19-year-olds and their parents. And we also wanted to address our history of the conflict as well, and how that might be impacting on children's and parents' mental health. So it was a random probability survey. We sampled 30,000 households from the postcode register and did all the nice statistical modelling to make sure that we had good representation. And doors were knocked on up to 5 times, and the child in the household whose birthday was next was the one who was selected as sort of proxy measure of random probability. So the survey was done in computer-assisted interviewing, took between 30 and 45 minutes to complete, and parents were sort of discouraged to be in the same room as the child whenever they were completing it, so they were assured of sort of privacy. And we had a fantastic team from Perceptive Insight who delivered the survey. So 2 to 10-year-olds, the parent completed the survey. 11 to 15-year-olds, the young person was invited to complete it, and then there was some parental measures as well. And then 16 to 19-year-olds, the young person completed it. So again, from that 30,000, we contacted over 21,000 households, which is huge, up to 5 times. Of those households, 4,600 were eligible. And we got a final sample of over 3,000 young people, and that was a response rate of 67%, which is pretty unheard of in this kind of sort of random household survey. So people do want to talk about their mental health. They feel it's important, and I think that's an encouraging message that we need to draw on. We have 2,800 parents of those 3,000 children, and just caveat, that's not a random probability sample of the parents, it's just a nice add-on to our population, and they were mostly mums, but Anne will go into that. So we have a range of measures. I'm just going to highlight some of the ones that we have already sort of analysed. We've got emotional and behavioural problems using the SDQ, common mood and anxiety disorders using the revised Children's Anxiety and Depression Scale, so that measures things like OCD, general anxiety, social phobia, separation anxiety. And then we have the trauma screeners as well. So we could test or screen for PTSD and complex PTSD. And we also explored some of the impact around the Troubles and paramilitary activity that we all know is ongoing in our society, and it's the underbelly of Northern Ireland that we need to address. We also included screening for other disorders. We've got an autism screener, We have disordered eating, which I'll caveat scoff is the worst ever acronym for an eating disorder measure, but it's yeah. We have the psychotic-like experiences screener and disordered social media use. Now, social media disorder is not in DSM-5, but we all know that this is an issue for young people. And then we also included some questions around self-harm and suicidal ideation and attempts. So in terms of the results, around 12% of the population screened positively for emotional problems, 10% conduct problems. You can see the results there. And of course, the relationship with deprivation, area deprivation, we just used the multiple index of deprivation for Northern Ireland. So it's a proxy measure, a rough measure of deprivation, but it just shows you that relationship between the social and environmental context and mental health. Interesting in our data is that males 5 to 10-year-olds differs from the international literature and England and Wales and Scotland in that we have higher levels of emotional problems in that younger age group of boys. And I know anecdotally from family support hubs, etc., they see that issue being flagged in young boys. So why is that different? We don't really know. In line with the rest of the literature, females aged 16 to 19 had higher levels of emotional and behavioural problems than boys, but that again, that chimes with the international literature. And despite the legacy of political violence and our really complicated history, our higher levels of deprivation, our rates aren't that much higher, which I suppose maybe there's an issue there that we are a more resilient community. In terms of mood and anxiety disorders, 1 in 8 children and young people had a mood and anxiety disorder, and you can see panic disorder was the highest rating one, and separation anxiety disorder. And we did some statistical analysis to try and identify some of the risk factors for any mood or anxiety disorder, and poor physical health is a major flag for a young person. So these are risk factors that you will be seeing in day-to-day practice. Special educational needs, 4.5 times more likely to have had a mood anxiety disorder. And then our issue around parental mental health, that's almost 2.5 times greater your chance of having a mood and anxiety disorder. And the deprivation factor there as well. So if a child age or 11 to 19-year-old had 3 or more ACEs, this increased their rate of a mood and anxiety disorder by 8 times. That's a pretty stark figure. But one thing in our data, we also tried to measure positive childhood experiences, benevolent childhood experience scale, and this mitigated to some point your risk of developing a mood and anxiety disorder. And that's a really positive message for you to take home today, that those positive interactions that a teacher, a GP, a social worker can have with a young person can help protect them. And then we have the evidence for that. So that's a major message for you. Again, all these risk factors you can see there, 5 times more likely if you're between 16 and 19-year-olds. If you've got a physical health problem, up to 4 times more likely. Special educational needs, receipt of social security, and the parental mental health problems. So in terms of disordered eating, this is a flag that's been raised, and since COVID we've seen the rates really skyrocket, and this is a major issue. I mean, 23% of our sample of 11 to 19-year-old girls were flagging for disordered eating. This is a concern. This is something that we need to look at in terms of prevention. And again, that risk group between the 16 and 19-year-olds is raising. So very briefly, I don't know how we're doing for time, but I think it's really important that we look at the troubles, because we don't have prevalence rates of mental health disorders relating to our experience of the troubles. So we used measures that had been used in other population surveys in Northern Ireland. We asked parents and carers specific questions about exposure to death, injury, and intimidation and threats, and how much they felt their community was affected by the troubles. and how it, reflecting back how much it had affected their own life. We asked 11 to 19-year-olds how much they thought the Troubles had impacted on their family. And then lastly, we asked some specific questions about paramilitary activity in areas, whether they create fear and intimidation, whether they contribute to crime, drug dealing and antisocial behaviour, had they ever been threatened or injured by paramilitaries. So again, this is population level data. So we have analysed these relationships. So have the Troubles impacted on your family? They were allowed to answer none, a little, a lot. And then we have cross-referenced that with the potential of having a mood and anxiety disorder, PTSD, self-harm and suicide ideation. So for those young people who had been affected a little, again, it's 2 times greater chance of having a mood and anxiety disorder, and 4 times more likely to have, if it had been a lot. And again, you can just see this dose-response effect throughout all the different scales there. So if your family had been affected a lot, 8 times more likely to screen positively for PTSD, 4 times more likely to have experienced self-harm, and almost 6 times more likely to have suicide ideation. So there's a very clear relationship there. The impact of paramilitarism, you can see there 23% of 11 to 19-year-olds think that paramilitaries continue to create fear and intimidation in their area. And whenever we looked at the parents in the same sample, and our sample was very evenly distributed throughout Northern Ireland, so you're looking at 43.5% of parents are feeling this threat in their community. Again, figures are very high for drug dealing, crime and antisocial behaviour. And interestingly, even though the numbers are quite small, there's still 17 of our young people had been threatened by paramilitaries. And considering what impact this must have on them is frightening. And again, over 100 parents in our sample as well. So it's still there, it's still going on. It's something that we need to be confronting as a society. And I think this is a really powerful message, and how we communicate this to our armed groups, our paramilitaries. How do we do this? Paramilitaries have a direct relationship between, or there's this association between developing a mood and anxiety disorder, you're twice as likely, PTSD, self-harm and suicide. And I think these figures are really stark. And how do we communicate this message to those who are working to support and try and deal with our community violence? And then, again, it's just that dose relationship and that risk that there is for young people. So in terms of conclusions and next steps, I think what we've tried to demonstrate, and we're doing a piece of work at the minute where we're going out and engaging with a whole range of different stakeholders, from Education Authority to the Youth Service, and trying to say, look, this is the data, what else do you need? How can we help you to use this to affect your practice? But just demonstrates how important this kind of data is, and for the department to be investing in this kind of information. There are limitations, it's cross-sectional, there's no follow-up, we had great difficulty even getting permission to go out and knock doors. So, all of this needs to be addressed at a certain level. And we also need to have an adult survey. The legacy of the Troubles is a living reality for many young people and many parents. More than a third were aware of the impact on their family, and we have to confront the transgenerational aspect of our trauma. And these are children who have been born after the Good Friday Agreement and our relative peace. And we need to tackle how paramilitaries continue to impact on daily life. So mitigating for the risk factors, there's some strong messages there. We need trauma-informed services. I work for the Regional Trauma Network, and we're going to be developing a children and young people service, so this is something that we need to be looking at holistically. Understanding the social determinants, and going back to Brett's very powerful demonstration of that. How special educational needs, how children are treated and respected in school whenever they feel different. This is a very was very close to my own heart, and it's something we need to address. And then physical health and well-being, and making every contact count. We know that we don't live in isolation, but our mental health affects our physical health, and all of those, that holistic approach is really important. And then importantly, supporting parents and families. So final slide is we've got lots of outputs already, but we'll be sending you these presentations afterwards so you can access it. I'm going to hand over to Anne.